Hey, welcome back. Thanks again for stopping by the page here to check out some of my latest work, my latest videos. Want to do something a little bit different this time. Last time I talked a little bit about some of the works that I put out, but I want to talk a little bit about. I'm generally a book nerd, and I know quite a few book nerds on social media, from Facebook and Twitter, and hopefully a few of you will wander over to my YouTube page. I just set one up to put these kind of cheesy videos up there, just talking about various different types of things. Maybe we can get some interesting dialogue going about books. Want to do something different. Over the last few months, probably I'd say about maybe 8-10 months ago, I got very interested in reading literature from the counterculture period of the 60s. So I wandered into, got a book recommendation on Facebook to read Charles Bukowski. And I went and read Pulp and then Post Office and then some other works of his. And you could really see that era, and not that I grew up in that era, but God knows I've seen enough movies from that era and about the hippies, the yippies, the counterculture, and the turmoil and turbulence that happened culturally and socially and politically in the 60s. After reading some of this, some of Bukowski, and then reading the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test by Tom Wolfe, who you probably know better for writing Bonfire of the Vanities. Tom Wolfe wrote a book called The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, where he rode cross-country with Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters. And it was an incredibly interesting book. Maybe a little slow at first, but it kind of gives you a good insight into that period and just kind of the radical drug use and the various political and philosophical opinions that came out of that era. And that fascinated me enough. I kind of wanted to know, where did they get their ideas? So I kind of wandered back into the previous decade and started reading what we call today the Beat Generation. Ginsberg, Kerouac, Burroughs, Ferlinghetti, those types of guys. So I started reading a little bit about that because a lot of the not the mainstream, but the counterculture leaders in the 60s gave a lot of credit to guys like Jack Kerouac for inspiring them and what they did in their movements. So I started reading a little bit of the beat writers. So I picked up a book called The Essential Beat Reader, I think was what it was called. Had a lot of different poetry from various poets, featuring Allen Ginsberg. But it only had excerpts of full-length books from Burroughs and Kerouac and so on. So I wanted to kind of go back into those and pick those up. So got into Jack Kerouac and started reading On the Road. And then I picked this gem up. This is the Dharma Bums. And this is a really interesting book. So I just wanted to kind of highlight the Dharma Bums and a little bit about that. Those writers at the time. Jack Kerouac, on the Road, it was kind of an essential, cross-country adventure kind of book. And Dharma Bums is very much in the same vein, but exploring a lot about religion, philosophy. They were heavily into Buddhism. It was Ray and Jaffe, the main characters in there. Bit of a slow read if you're not into that kind of thing. If you're into more of action, adventure, horror, probably not going to be your thing. If you're more into classics, if you like things like Hemingway, if you like things like F. Scott Fitzgerald, who happens to be my favorite writer, then you'll really get into this book and kind of see the purpose of what they were trying to do, what Kerouac was doing in the Dharma Bums and some of his other works about going cross country and kind of that place where you lose yourself and you find yourself. I'm really big into that concept myself, and I think any good cross-country adventure book, if it's worth its salt, would have some influence of Kerouac in this. So Kerouac was somebody I'd read, got into that a long time ago, but never really delved too heavily into it until more recently. But I could kind of see the influence that reading him and Tom Wolfe had on a little bit of my work. It's not that I'm anywhere near the caliber of writer of those guys. Those guys are incredible. But like I said, any book that's kind of one of those cross-country adventure, philosophical point of view and those trips, if it's worth the ink on the page, you're probably influenced by these guys. And Pot of Gold. by yours truly. As I scour through this again, I've read this several times since I wrote it. It's really, it really kind of touches on to that place where you lose yourself and you find yourself and discover who you are in the grand scheme of life, and past, present, and future. So I kind of took that approach in a comedy, which is far off the beaten path of what Kerouac would do, but nonetheless, it's an interesting book. So if you get an opportunity, you want to pick that up, that's great. But I want to kind of highlight some of the beat readers and beat writers, Kerouac specifically. Thanks again for stopping by. Next time I do a video, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the short stories and kind of what led to these in the horror book that I wrote, Bedtime Stories for the Terminally Afraid. There's too much of a glare on there to see this. These are on Amazon. All of these are. Any of my works, paperback are $9.95. I try to keep everything under $10. Kindle versions are $3.99. So hopefully you'll pick one of these up and enjoy the stories. Pot of Gold, especially, if you kind of like the cross-country trip and the hilarity of anything that can happen with that. I'll highlight that book in a different video as well, but next time I'll get to Bedtime Stories for the Terminally Afraid. Thanks again. Check out my work on, like I said, on Amazon. One thing I'll mention, Pot of Gold, if you buy the paperback version, you get the Kindle version free. So that's kind of a little bit of a perk for that book. It is kind of a laugh every page. I kind of wanted to have it that way where you kind of don't want to put it down, I guess, when you get in the middle of some sort of hilarious scene. But we'll get into the other next time, and then we'll highlight another book that I've recently read as well. So what are you reading? What book suggestions do you have for anybody that's watching this video? Feel free and leave it in the comments below. And thanks again for stopping by. My website is cyrusalderwood.com, and I hope to be talking to you again soon. Have a great day.